Well, since COVID, it's no secret that there has been tremendous resistance from the medical industrial complex to stop any form of legislation that could fix some of the COVID madness. We're bringing on Senator and Dr. Larry Stutts to talk about his efforts to push back. All coming up on 1819 News, the podcast. We have an incredible culture here in the state of Alabama, but our politics and public policy don't reflect the people of Alabama. Media drives culture. Culture is what drives politics and public policy. Welcome, everyone, to 1819 News, the podcast. I'm Brian Dawson, CEO of 1819 News and host of this here podcast, where we are in pursuit of a free and flourishing Alabama every single week. We've got a great guest today as I bring in people from Montgomery to celebrate the ones that are actually doing good work down there. Obviously, I'm highly critical of many things going on in Montgomery, and to balance that out, I think it's wise to talk about the people who are actually down there going against the grain, working to make good things happen. And so this week, I'm bringing on Senator Larry Stutts from Northwest Alabama. He has done a lot of good things in the realm of the medical freedom world, is also school choice, and really is just a reliable conservative vote on any of the issues. And so bringing on Senator Stutts today to talk about the Alabama Department of Public Health. Boy, that's going to be fun. Medical freedom just overall, and some of the efforts since COVID that there have been for medical freedom, and some of the things that he thinks are stopping that. We're going to talk about the certificate of need. It's a really interesting topic. If you don't know much about it, I mean, if you've been listening to the podcast, you probably do. We'll dive into what is the certificate of need board? Where did it come from? Ronald Reagan. Why did Ronald Reagan, a conservative, bring in the certificate of need board? We'll dive into, won't go too deep, but I think it's important for you guys to know and what the progress has been on getting rid of that. Is that ever even possible? And then we're going to talk about school choice and Senator Stutts's work on that and how he played a role. But before we do, I want to remind you guys, so if you're watching this and you look down at the YouTube views and you see, this podcast, this episode only got like 178 views or 126 views or whatever, we are rebuilding our YouTube audience. And so if you're watching this on YouTube, go and like, subscribe, hit the bell, share, comment on the podcast so that it increases its engagement. We were removed from YouTube for telling the truth. And when we were removed from YouTube, we had podcasts that had 50,000 views with John Croyle. We had podcasts with Rick Burgess that had 10,000 views. We had podcasts with other people that did not have that celebrity that those two men have, that we were, averaging well over 1,000 downloads per episode, but we got removed. So we're building up our YouTube audience. It's not that no one listens. If you go to our data and statistics on our audio only stuff, you can go over and look at Rumble and see that we have, most of our interviews have a lot more downloads there. And so we're working on rebuilding our YouTube audience. So don't let that number deceive you. Instead, let it inspire you to share our YouTube feeds and ask people to subscribe and comment and interact in the comment section so that it builds that YouTube audience, as that is the place that you need to be. I'm pretty sure that they stopped kicking people off YouTube, and now they just squish your ability to get reach. And I'm sure that's happening to us again because we are constantly going against the narrative. But please go do that. Like, subscribe, share, hit the bell for notifications, comment, and tell others to do the same so that we can get that YouTube audience built back up. Thank you for doing that. All right, Senator Larry Stutts, thank you so much for taking the time to come join us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Brian.
Yes, sir. You got to get up on the microphone a little bit. There you go.
Okay.
Boom. There you go.
Is that better?
Yep, there it is. See, the temptation and the reason I'm glad you're wearing your headphones, because what happens to me is if I don't have my headphones on, I start to lean back and lean back and lean back and then lean back. And then if you don't have the headphones on, you don't realize the microphone's not hearing you. So anyway, how are you?
I'm great. Great. Had a good drive down.
Yeah.
No problem.
So I run into you when I am up in the Shoals. Is that where your district is?
It is. My district covers 4 counties in northwest Alabama. We live right outside Tuscumbia.
Okay.
Just south of Tuscumbia. But so that's kind of my home base. And when I was in medical practice, my office was in Sheffield.
Okay. Got a buddy up there, Chester McKinney. I'm sure you know Chester.
I know Chester well.
Yeah.
Chester and I have been friends since high school.
Yeah, there you go. He's got that halfway house that's right there on the property of their kind of sawmill operations or whatever it is that he's got going on up there. And I've gone up and shared my testimony at Lifehouse, which is that halfway house.
Yeah,
So,
they're
anyway.
they're doing a great job there,
Yeah.
and Chester has put a lot of effort into that over the last several years.
Yeah, he's a great man. Him and his brother both. Yeah, just incredible people. So I love that part of the state. I mean, it's amazing. Every time I'm up there, I wonder why I don't just move up here. It's beautiful. I feel that way about a lot of different parts of the states that I'm fortunate enough to travel to, and I feel that way about the part of the state where I live. I live in Wetumpka, up in the hills, and it's gorgeous there. So Alabama has plenty of places to offer, but there is something about Northwest Alabama that's very special. You guys pump out good people in state government. So you got Northeast Alabama that I don't think does as good of a job pumping out good people for the government, but Northwest Alabama, you've got Andrew Sorrell, you've got Jamie Keel, you've got Ernie Yarborough, you got Ben Harrison. I mean, it's like, man, it's like a machine over there of pumping out great guys that go down there and get it done. What's with that?
It has really changed in the last few years. I mean, the northwest corner of the state was one of the last strongholds of Democrat politics in the state. And when I got elected in 2014, I was the first Republican elected in that entire area since Reconstruction.
Yeah.
So it's really changed. When I got elected in 2014, like the county commissions in all these counties were predominantly Democrat, and the sheriffs were Democrats, and now it's a clean sweep of Republicans across all those counties.
Yeah, and it seems where there's contests where Democrats can actually win and there's tension, in order to win as a Republican, you actually have to be conservative, it seems like. And they say that the Daily Wire did like a deep dive investigation where they dove into and they looked at all the states with the strongest Republican supermajorities, and the stronger the supermajority, the more milquetoast the legislation produced. It's counterintuitive. You would think the stronger the supermajority, the more conservative the bills would be, but it's not. And I don't know what their hypothesis for why that was, but it certainly is. And we're working on trying to figure out what the reason for that is. But either way, very grateful for the folks from your part of the state and the work they do.
Thank you.
So, what is the actual Senate district? Did you say that's your
Senate District 6?
6? Got it.
Yeah.
I had Gary Palmer on earlier today, and he's Congressional District 6. So I guess it's just that's what I'm doing today. All right, man. So I want to talk about hearing your story. Everybody I bring on, I want to just get to know you, and then I want my audience to get to know you. And I think there's just a few questions that I always ask that really frame up who people are, which is, where were you born? Tell us about your parents, and where you were born and your parents and kind of your upbringing shaped and molded you professionally and politically.
Well, I was born in Sheffield at Helen Keller Hospital at the hospital that I practiced at. So I haven't made it very far in life. I ended up working at the same place I was born, but was very blessed to have two wonderful parents, and grew up in a strong Christian home with a strong work ethic. I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I have an older sister who lives in Huntsville, and then had an older brother who died quite a few years ago. Actually died when I was a sophomore in college, and he was in the Navy. He was a Navy pilot, and said my sister works at Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville. And I grew up in Cherokee, a little town that's right on the Alabama-Mississippi line. And the high school that I went to was a 2A high school then, but it's a 1A high school now.
Yeah.
And so it's a little small community of 900 people.
Yeah.
And my father was an accountant. My mother was a nurse.
Yeah.
And so just had a wonderful situation growing up, taught honesty, hard work, doing the right thing. And then I went to veterinary school first. I don't know if you knew that about my background, but I actually decided in the 7th grade I was going to be a veterinarian, and pursued that track, went to undergrad and to vet school at Auburn, and practiced for 5 years, and really struggled with when I was applying to vet school, I considered applying to medical school instead, and I kept thinking about that every year. And then Jackie and I got married in 1980, and we had talked about that and honestly prayed about it for 2 years and said, well, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, show me a way to do it. And it's a longer story than we probably have time for,
Sure.
but I met another veterinarian the next week who had gone to medical school. His name's Lee Booker. And anyway, he told me, this is what you need to do to apply. And so I said, well, if this is what the Lord wants me to do, I'll get accepted. So we went through the process. And, of course, by this time I had been out in veterinary practice 4 years and 4 years of vet school. So it had been 8 years since I had organic chemistry and physics and all the things that are on the MCAT.
Yeah.
And Lee told me, if you make 45 on the MCAT, you'll be a competitive applicant. If you make over 50, I'll guarantee you'll get in.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we got to the date of taking the MCAT, and I said it'd been 8 years since I had all those courses. And the night before the MCAT, Jackie and I laid in bed and prayed, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, help me make over 50.
Yeah.
And so I took the test the next day, and anyway, got my score back 6 weeks later, and I made 51.
Nice. There you go.
And so that's the short version of
Sure.
my journey to medical school. So I went to medical school at the University of South Alabama, and so we moved to Mobile for 4 years.
That's pretty far away from Northwest
It
Alabama.
is, long way. And then I did my residency at Caraway in Birmingham, here in Birmingham. And so we lived in Mobile 4 years and Birmingham 4 years. And so 8 years and 4 children later, we moved back to Northwest Alabama.
Awesome.
And I practiced there for 32 years. I've actually just retired in the last few months.
And what was your specialty?
Obstetrics and gynecology.
Okay.
So I delivered babies.
Delivered babies. Everybody knows you because you delivered them. Yep.
Yep.
Well, that's good. And I think your medical background has made you a prominent figure post-COVID in the legislature. Obviously, I'm sure it helped before that, but you really popped on my radar post-COVID because of someone who's in the medical industry. That's what I think of it as, the medical and industrial complex. But someone who was a doctor, has a medical background, who's also realizes that, the government probably didn't handle this exactly, very good. So I think that's been helpful. And so as you, practiced medicine and doing that, what took you from there to politics, and what was that journey?
Well, I really had no intention of ever running for any public office. I mean, I considered myself an informed conservative voter, but had never run for any local political office at all, and was busy with my practice. And Bill Armistead was was chairman of the Alabama Republican Party, and I knew his name just from him being in the news, but we had never met. And I got back to my office on I did surgery on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday was my regular work schedule. Mm-hmm. And that particular Friday, I'd had 3 or 4 surgeries, and we closed the office at noon. So it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when I got back to the office, and I had a sticky note on my phone in my office to call Bill Armistead. And so I returned the call, and he wanted to know would I consider running for the state senate from District 6. And I said, no, Bill, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not interested. And he said, well, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I want you to think about it, pray about it over the weekend, and get back with me. And anyway, Jackie was out of town. When she got back Sunday night, I told her that about my phone call. And over the weekend, I had kind of warmed up to the idea a little bit, but I thought that she would think it was crazy. And so her response really surprised me when she said, well, I think you ought to do it. You always complain about career politicians, and I always say just regular, ordinary people ought to get involved, and here's your chance. So anyway, I said, well, let's think about it another couple of days. So anyway, I called Bill back on Monday and said, Bill, I've got 2 questions. I said, one, can I win? And number two, how much money do I have to raise? And so he said, yes, you can win, and, the party's going to support you. He said, when I became chairman, flipping that area of the state was one of my goals. As I said before, we were one of the last Democrat strongholds, and the senator from that district that I would be running against was a guy named Roger Bedford, and Roger had he served 28 years in the state Senate, so he was a real entrenched incumbent and almost considered unbeatable. So anyway, the rest of the story is I decided to run, and John Pudner was a guy who had worked on several campaigns, and he and Bill were friends. And Bill enticed John to help me with my campaign. And without his assistance, there's no way I would have won. He is an absolute genius of analyzing the district and saying, these are where the votes are, this is where you need to work, this is what you need to do. And so John was just a tremendous asset, and he helped me with my first campaign because we had absolutely no idea what we were doing to start a campaign. And it was an eye-opening experience. I thought you went around and talked to people, and I had delivered at that time about 10,000 babies, and, everywhere we went in public, somebody would come up and speak to you and show you a picture of their baby. And so I thought everybody knew me. Yeah. And so when I decided to run, the party did a poll for the district, and I had about a 6% name recognition.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh, my goodness, because that was exactly the opposite of what I expected to find out. And but John said, well, that's a perfect candidate. I had the people that knew me liked me, but nobody knew me. Yeah. And so he said, that's the perfect candidate. All we've got to do is get your name out. You don't have a high negative rating. Yeah. You just don't have a rating. Yeah. And so anyway, that's the way the campaign started, and we won that first race by 70 votes. So it was,
it's a close one.
Really, really close. Had a recount, and I'd had 69 votes, and then I picked up one vote in the recount and ended up winning by 70 votes. So
that's good.
So that's how I got involved and how I ran.
Okay. And how long have you been there?
I'm in my third term.
Third term.
I got 1 year to go in my third term.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'm just trying to place the timing on it. Third term, coming to the end of the third term, and then what are some of the things that you, again, with COVID coming, 2019, 2020, all of those things, there was been a huge focus on the Alabama Department of Public Health. I think, prior to that, no one even really thought about the Alabama Department of Public Health. So certainly no one thought about the state health officer. Like that was on literally no one's mind. Yeah. It's like a board of directors. Like it doesn't matter until it matters. Right. And there's a lot of those things where it's like the state health officer didn't matter until all of a sudden it mattered. And, what we discovered is that the way that the state health officer, who had way more authority than anyone ever thought that a human being could have, specifically one that no one knew who he was, we get into a quote unquote medical emergency, and then this guy has got unilateral powers to shut down schools and force you to do this, and curfews, just crazy stuff. And we're like, well, the governor needs to rein this guy in, man. Like the governor needs to rein him in. Well, what we found was that the governor doesn't have the authority to rein him in. He does not serve at the pleasure of the governor. He sits at the pleasure of this board, and I forget the name of the board, but that board is made up from the same people from the board of the Medical Association of the state of Alabama. It's a 1-to-1 board. The same people on the board of the Medical Association of the state of Alabama, which is a lobbying group. That's an association. That's a lobbying firm, right? A union, essentially, a medical union, a doctor's union. The doctors union, let me put it that way, they're the ones that choose the state health officer. And, lobbying groups typically, and again, I don't know, I haven't dug all the way. We have done some investigative stuff on this, but it was years ago and I can't remember. But I wouldn't be surprised if MASA takes money from organizations that would be incentivized to want things out of that crisis that maybe wouldn't be as good. But either way, a doctor's union should not be picking the state health officer. The state health officer, in my opinion, like all these other cabinet positions, should serve at the pleasure of the governor. That way, if that person is not performing, there's an accountability for the people to hold the governor accountable, who will then hold him accountable. Right now, he is completely unelected, accountable to no one but some lobbyists. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily categorize all the people on the state board as lobbyists.
Yes.
I mean, it's made up of physicians that practice in the state.
Yeah.
And they do have, an interest in doing a good job and an interest in the state health officer doing a good job. And let me preface all this by saying that Scott Harris and I were in residency together, so and are friends.
Yeah.
I don't agree with everything that he did.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, don't agree with most of the things that he did.
Yeah.
But I don't think it ought to be an entirely political appointment.
Yeah.
It should be more accountable than it is, absolutely. But and I don't have a problem with it being appointed by the governor and directly serving on the governor's cabinet. The problem is that's not a job that I would want.
Yeah.
It's a tough job to fill, and the problem with all of that is that Dr. Harris was primarily following the CDC guidelines with some of the things that he did with COVID. And he and I had this conversation privately several times during the process. And he was following the CDC guidelines, and those were terrible.
Yeah.
Things like closing down schools. I mean, the mortality rate of COVID in children is essentially zero.
Yeah.
And when you look at building immunity in the population, 30-odd% of the population were school-age children. If they all got exposed and developed natural immunity, if you get around 70% immunity in the population, the epidemic is over.
Yeah.
And so you could immunize 30% of the population with just natural exposure. So taking children out of school was absolutely the wrong thing to do. It defeated the purpose of building herd immunity in the general population. And, of course, they were concerned about, well, they could take it home and their elderly grandparents could catch it or whatever. But the fact is, none of those things that Dr. Fauci recommended, that the CDC recommended, wearing masks, we now know that didn't help. We now know that the vaccine was hurried to market. I mean, I took the vaccine when they were telling healthcare workers to all take the vaccine. I took 2 vaccines, but if I knew then what I know now, I would not have taken the vaccine. Yeah. And as far as, we were told all these things that, if you get vaccinated, we'll stop the spread. If you get vaccinated, you can't catch COVID. None of those things turned out to be true.
Also safe and effective.
Safe and effective.
Not true.
It absolutely was not true. Like I said, if I knew the risk, so many things. The thing I hate about the whole process, besides the fact that it didn't work, is that it has destroyed people's confidence in medicine in general. Yes. It has destroyed people's confidence in science. When you look at, what do we know? Well, for Dr. Fauci to say things like his famous quote of "I am science."
Yeah.
That's just so bogus to say anything like that. And it's destroyed the confidence of the trust in the public health officer, in the CDC, and the National Institute of Health. Any of those things, as soon as you and I both, as soon as you see that something comes from the CDC 15 years ago, you thought, well, that's probably accurate. Now your first thought is, well, that's probably not accurate.
Correct.
And so it's destroyed the population's confidence in that whole process.
Yeah.
And that's very regrettable.
It's, in a way, I don't want to say, I think the distrust in the and it's earned distrust in the medical community is as much of an emergency or epidemic than the actual virus was. And what I mean by that is exactly what you just alluded to with the CDC and the NIH and everything, but less so with that, with the fact, now Dr. Stuart Tankersley is my general practice physician, was before COVID. That was just like a God thing that has ended up who was my doctor, whatever. But not everybody has him as their general practice physician. And then specifically me with pediatricians, I don't trust the pediatricians. I know that they have a reimbursement policy that tells them that you need to get your children vaccinated, because if they don't have a 97% pediatric schedule compliance, that they get docked by their insurance company 20% reimbursement. So is he going to tell me the truth about vaccines, or is he going to be thinking about his 20% reimbursement? You start to find out about all this stuff and you're like, I'm going to bring my kids in to have you do what? No way. And so now, a couple of weeks ago, I had like 4 kids with a double ear infection and upper respiratory infection. It's like, man, I would love to be able to take my kids in to see a pediatrician that I know didn't have ulterior motives for wanting to give my kids something that they don't need. Outside of vaccines, whatever else, if this is how they're operating, how are they going to operate on something as simple as an ear infection? What's motivating them? And so the absolute distrust to the medical community because of what took place then and has since, get us studying to even before COVID, some of the distrust that was coming. It's horrible. And to me, I feel like now every single person, I was just talking to Craig Monger about this on one of the last podcasts, like every single person has to become a teacher to teach their children. Everybody has to become a doctor to take care of their family's health. Everybody's got to become a financial investor so they can, like, the whole point of having professionals is so that they do that thing and that you don't have to become a doctor. I can bring my kids to a doctor and I can go to a doctor because the doctor's the doctor, but that's gone now.
And you can trust what they tell
Correct.
you. And that has,
it's gone.
I said, I agree with you completely. That's what I was trying to say. It's the biggest detriment to society in general is that those levels of confidence have been destroyed, and including vaccinations. I practiced medicine for 32 years. I've never seen a case of measles in a patient.
Yeah.
Because we all got MMR vaccines.
Sure.
I'm barely old enough, but old enough to remember polio.
Yeah.
There were children 2 or 3 years ahead of me in school that had polio. And, when I was 5 years old, I think was when the polio vaccine came out. And, who knows anybody with polio now?
Yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is because of the distrust that's been built with the COVID vaccine, people are going to forego vaccines that have had a generational impact. And, like I said, things like measles, polio, mumps, I mean, those things are unheard of now,
Sure.
But it's because there were effective vaccines. But people are afraid of vaccines in general now because of the debacle with the COVID vaccine.
Sure. I was already skeptical. It's the reason I did not take the shot. Didn't have anyone, my wife didn't take the shot. Nobody, within my inner did not take it because I was already skeptical about what it like. So when I was a kid, I took like 7 vaccines. Okay. 7. Now it's 72. Something's wrong. Right. And so, maybe the way back then when they were doing things that could have been effective. I think there's some stuff that's up for debate. I understand your position. What's happening now is horrible. And then when you find out that the insurance companies are literally holding these doctors' reimbursements hostage based off of their compliance to this schedule, now there's no way to know, you know what I mean? Like that financial incentive completely delegitimizes any advice or research or anything that would come from your doctor. But anyway, I'm not going to get into a vaccine debate.
I was not aware of that. We did not do vaccines routinely in my office, so I was not aware. I'm sure pediatricians and maybe family medicine doctors or who would be primarily affected by that, but I was not aware.
It's pediatricians' offices. No, I had a pediatrician straight up tell me, because anyway, I'm not going to go rehash the whole story, but he told me, I probably have a class action lawsuit on my hands. Let me tell you what goes on when this happens. He outlined the whole thing. Yeah. He didn't know that I was the CEO of 1819 News when he told me either, which is kind of funny. But anyway, more on that later. So medical freedom, there's a lot of stuff going on in the legislature. Obviously, Ernie Yarbrough, another guy that's up there in your neck of the woods, has been pushing a lot of health freedom things, and specifically, I think the one that's so common sense that seems like it should be really easy is that businesses shouldn't be able to force people to take specifically an experimental injection, but much less any. And I love the way Ernie describes it. He says, look, we're not talking about telling someone to put on a hard hat and safety glasses here, or, some type of, protective gear that's on side that when they're done and they clock out, they can take their hard hat off and they can take those glasses off. We're literally saying, if you want to work here, you have to inject this substance into your body that cannot be removed. And that's a little bit different. Talk about where your involvement's been on some of the medical freedom and health freedom legislation in the last 3 or 4 years.
Well, I think I certainly agree, we faced some of those issues in the hospital. There were hospital policies that came down not from the physicians, but that came from administration.
Yeah.
And, early on in COVID, we had a group of doctors. I was not one of the ones on the committee, but there were, I think, 5 doctors, and there was, a pathologist and several other doctors that had a COVID committee. And to the best of my knowledge, the COVID committee never met. It was all a decree from administration of mask. Yeah. You have to have a vaccine to work in the hospital. You have to, it was, the decision making was not made by people that should be making those decisions. They were made by administrative people. And that's not the way those decisions should be made. Yeah. Now, here's my argument for the vaccines, we'll say, for instance. If you believe the vaccine works, if you believe it prevents you from getting the disease, right? You're going to take the vaccine and you think the vaccine works, then why do you care whether I take it or not?
Correct.
If it prevents you from getting it, whether I take it or not should not matter to you.
Yeah.
You're already protected. Yeah. So my protection should be my personal freedom.
Correct.
I should be able to decide, well, hey, I think the vaccine works. And, and back to the COVID vaccine specifically, I'll be honest, the day that I took it, when I filled out all the paperwork, and I didn't read every word because it was several pages, but one of the things you signed was exempting Pfizer from any liability.
Yep.
And then when you found out later that they had asked that the data from their trials be sealed for 70 years, that lets you know that there were things that were found out in the trials that they didn't want anybody else to know.
Yeah.
And like I said, I had pause. They were telling all of us, everybody needs to take the vaccine, particularly if you're a healthcare worker, if you're going to be working in the hospital, here's the vaccine. It was available first for healthcare workers, but I had second thoughts when I signed that liability release form.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a weird world. I'm trying to think of any other world in which you can create a product and then be completely liable. I guess other than IVF now, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, it's very, very, very bizarre way of structuring something. Like, here's this product that we're going to force people to take, and we're not liable.
Right.
That's a pretty good deal if you're in the manufacturing of that.
It is.
If you're running a ministry or you own a business, my guess is that you've been thinking about starting a podcast for a while now, but for various reasons, it hasn't happened yet. Send me an email. I need to personally connect you with Yonder Child Media. They built this studio in 2 days and tackle all of the production. I just come in, start talking, and leave. It's that easy. They do everything else. Whether you want to record at your business or a home office like they just built for me, you come in, start talking, and Yonder Child will do everything else. Send me an email. That's going to be BRYAN, Brian.Dawson, DAWSON at 1819news.com, and I'd be happy to personally connect you. Give us a little bit of background on Certificate of Need, what's going on in the state with that currently.
Well, the last 2 years, I filed a bill related to Certificate of Need and knew when I filed both of them that they weren't going to pass. But, we spend a lot of time talking about health care in the legislature, and a lot of time particularly talking about rural health care. So last year, I filed a bill to exempt rural hospitals from the Certificate of Need law. And then, if you look at the two areas that were most lacking in healthcare in Alabama, it would be obstetrics and delivering babies, and it would be psychiatric services. So this year I filed a bill to say, well, these are the two areas of need, so let's exempt these two areas from the Certificate of Need law. And, all the listeners may not be familiar with the Certificate of Need process, but basically it is something that if you want to offer a new healthcare service or remodel your facility, there's a dollar threshold, and if you exceed that dollar threshold for building a new facility or remodeling a facility, or if it's a new service, then you have to go through the Certificate of Need process, and that's a long, expensive process. And anybody within your service area that provides that can object to you providing that service. And then it goes through the whole process, is heard before a board. If the board rules against you, you can appeal it, and they appoint an administrative law judge to hear the case. Then if the administrative law judge rules against you, you can even appeal it to circuit court. So it can stay tied up in the process for years. Here in Birmingham, the perfect example of that is where Grandview Hospital is now. And that was, originally a Health South facility. And when Health South went out of business and the hospital was not completed, it sat vacant for years. The building was almost, 80% maybe completed. And it sat vacant for years while they went through the Certificate of Need process to get what is now Grandview Hospital approved by the CON board. The background, the history of the CON is, and I don't remember all the exact dates, but quite a few years ago, healthcare services were reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid on a cost-plus basis. So you could simply build a facility and say, this is what it cost me to build the facility, this is what it cost me to offer this service, and I get that plus a percentage. So you were reimbursed that way. That has not been the case now for years. The federal government encouraged states through legislation to have a review process to help control healthcare costs, because when you were reimbursed at a cost-plus basis, there was no cap on the cost. If it was expensive to bill, that was okay. You were still going to get that plus a markup. And that has not been the case now for years. So originally there was probably a need for a Certificate of Need process, but it has long outlived its usefulness because nobody's reimbursed at cost-plus now. And so what it does, it stifles competition. And I don't remember the exact number, but about half of the states have some type of Certificate of Need process. There are 6 states that have an extremely restrictive CON process, and Alabama is on that list. Alabama has one of the most restrictive CON processes in the country. And, we think of ourselves as free market, conservative, and, another thing in healthcare that we'll probably talk about in a minute was the age of medical consent.
Yeah.
But, we have one of the most restrictive CON laws in the entire country, and we think we're free market, and we need to get some of that out of the way. What has come out of me filing those 2 bills, and we're going to have a group get together later this summer, and we're going to try to meet. We're working on a date in July, and we're going to try to get all the interested parties from the Hospital Association and some private practice physicians and people from conservative think tanks around the country, and we're going to try to get those together in July and sit down and talk through what we can realistically do to reform the CON process. My personal opinion would be to abolish it.
Sure.
I'm for abolishment, but realizing in the last 2 years that was not going to happen. I mean, there's been bills. You mentioned Ben Harrison earlier. He introduced a bill last year to just completely abolish the CON process.
Andrew Sorrell before him.
And Andrew Sorrell did before that. And that to me would be my preference, and just let the free market. And I understand that I practiced medicine for 32 years, that healthcare is not an entirely free market process, because you've got primarily third-party payers, and the direct consumer really doesn't have a real interest in what it costs. All they're worried about is what their insurance premium is. And so, but the corollary to that, in another segment of society, would be like, say, auto body repairs. If you have a wreck, your insurance is probably going to pay for your car to be fixed.
Yeah.
So you're not directly negotiating with the body shop on what it's going to cost to fix your car, just like it is in healthcare. You're not negotiating on what your appendectomy is going to cost, because your insurance is going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But if we extended that same argument and a new body shop wanted to open in town, and all the other body shops in town could get together and oppose them opening that body shop and say, we've got plenty of body shops here. We don't need any more auto body repair people in town, and we're going to oppose that, and we're going to take you to court to keep you from building a new body shop, you would say, well, that's nuts. But that's exactly what happens in healthcare.
Yeah. No, and that to me is like, how is this abused? And I think that's a great analogy with the body shops, because that's exactly right. So, say if you're, I don't know, we'll just use generalities. You've got a hospital, and you want to build some type of a, the type of practice is now slipping away from me. An orthoscopic like surgery center onto your existing hospital that's there. There's a huge need for it, but there's maybe 3 other orthoscopic surgery centers that are in town, and they know if you start one, they're going to lose business. And so they aren't actually they're not coming in and saying, hey, we don't want them to build this new center. They're going to say, well, there's not a need for it.
Right.
Of course they're going to say that, because if you built it, and here's one, what if they built one that actually outperformed theirs and did a better job and took their customers, because like they had a new free market idea that would allow them to do the job better? Well, that's the last thing they want. So they're going to oppose it.
Right.
And you go back to, there's always been some mechanism for this. If you hear the story of Henry Ford and how he brought, Ford Motors to market, there was the huge, auto manufacturing companies that existed before them that wanted to stomp him out. And he had to fight. And then finally he was able to break through and created the manufacturing process and everything that brought us, what we have now. But there was these huge conglomerates that wanted to stomp out the new guy who had this innovative idea that could have saved everyone money and brought a better product to the market.
Right.
Well, that's going to affect our business. So no, we're going to stomp you out, little guy. So
yeah. It stifles innovation. And it limits services.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's a direct cause and effect, but we talk about rural health care in general, and the closure of rural hospitals, and the states that have no certificate of need law. There's not a single rural hospital closed in any of those states.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a direct cause and effect, but I'm saying it is a statistic that one cannot ignore.
Yeah.
To say that, the free market probably does work.
Yeah. Amen. I had Susan DuBose on recently, and we were talking about the medical age of consent. And were you the Senate counterpart for that?
I was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre to me that is even a conversation, much less legislation that's being resisted. That parents should be deciding that.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable.
Me too. And there are a lot of things like that really aren't on your radar. And again, what I said before about we say we're a conservative state, but we had the lowest age of medical consent in the entire country. It's 14. All but 3 states are 18. And Alabama had a medical consent age of 14.
And we're 19-year-old adults in Alabama. Now, keep in mind, like everything else, you're 19 here. Like in every other state, it's 18 to be an adult, but here you have to be 19 or 21 for everything. But not medical decisions. You can be 14.
14. And so we had a bill. My original bill raised it to 18.
Yeah.
Ended up getting amended to say 16. So we ended up taking the amendment. My preference was still that it be 18, and we would be in line with most of the rest of the country to have it at 18. But again, the legislative process, and we ended up compromising. And I said, well, 16 is better than 14, and maybe we can change it in the future. But I wanted it to be 18, and we ended up compromising to get rid of part of the opposition to it so we could pass the bill.
Who in their right mind would oppose the fact that parents have medical responsibility and authority, over the decisions, parents have authority and responsibility over the medical decisions of their children. One of the most, parental rights, common sense things on the planet. Who would ever oppose that? Who was opposing that? Who were you fighting with?
Well, early on, but way before the session started, when we were trying to draft the bill and we were working on it, I was on a conference call with about 10 doctors. It was organized, the State Medical Association organized it, and it was everybody except the doctors on the call, everybody except me was either a pediatrician or a child psychiatrist. And so I did a lot of listening to all their concerns. They were completely against raising the age of medical consent. And one of them said, and this is when I said I'm wasting my time talking to you all and or listening to you, one of them said, we just can't have parents interfering with treatment.
Wow.
And I said, well, you and I are not going to agree on anything, so we.
And what kind of treatment are we talking about? Genital mutilation? Like that seems like that's where the push is coming from.
Right, and where all that, the whole issue of gender dysphoria, and because the problem is, and I talked to many parents through the process while we were working on this bill, and the thing that, even though we had to compromise on the age, the thing that we did put in the bill is that parents have a right to see their child's medical record up until they're at the age of majority. But what I heard from several parents is that their child got referred for counseling by the school guidance counselor. They got enrolled in a program with a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and the parents, because the child was 15, the parents could not see the record. The doctor wouldn't talk to the parents, wouldn't tell them what the treatment plan was, wouldn't tell them what the diagnosis was. So you had a 15-year-old child that got referred from school to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and the parents were completely shut out of the process from that point forward. And that's detrimental to the child. If the child's going to recover, if the counseling's going to be successful, having family involvement, having the parents involved in that process, having the parents supporting what we're trying to do, having a common goal, all that is going to help the treatment be successful. And what we were doing was completely blocking the parents out of the process. And of course, the transgender issue stuff is what, brought a lot of it to the forefront, is that, your child has some gender dysphoria and they can talk to their counselor, and the parents don't know that they're involved in this whole process at school, and the parents are shut out of the process. And that's all just so fundamentally wrong. The parents have a God-given, biblically based, fundamental, whatever you want to call it, right and responsibility to care for their children, to be involved in their children. And I fully understand that they're not all perfect parents. I'm not a perfect parent. You're not.
Yeah.
But we still need to be involved. Just because you're not a perfect parent does not excuse you from the responsibility that you have to be one.
Sure. And a perfect parent would never let these people do what they're doing to the kids, and that's why they really want to circumvent it, is because they've got nefarious goals and means. I've been very vocal about this idea that there is a dedicated, concentrated, intentional effort from the left to steal the hearts, minds, and souls of the children of conservative Christian children, because liberals, whether it's homosexuality, trans, and just all this thing, and their replacement rates is like 0.8 per couple, even without all that stuff. They're not producing humans the way that you're supposed to produce humans, which is reproduction. They don't reproduce in the bedroom; they reproduce in the classroom. Okay, and so there is this this effort. In order for their ranks to grow, they have to steal our kids because they're not having them. And they do it through this type of stuff. And the fact that there are people in the Alabama legislature that listen to the psychiatrists and the medical associations and all the other people who were pushing back against this, to me is wicked. That there's people in the Alabama legislature who looked at this, and rather than just know, there's some stuff that's kind of hard to figure out. There is some things like, I don't know, man. This isn't one of them. Yeah, this is inherent parental rights in Alabama, the Bible Belt. Parents are the parents, and parents make medical decisions, period, or they work together to make those decisions with healthcare professionals. And so the fact that there was anyone in the legislature that pushed back and said, hey, this bill's not going to pass unless you guys hack it all to pieces.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. I think I don't remember the exact quote. You probably know it, but from Abraham Lincoln, of the politics of the classroom or the politics of the next generation. Yeah. And you're right. Stealing the hearts and minds of children is an issue. And back to what we were talking about earlier with it needs to be a decision between the healthcare provider and the parents. Yeah. And that's where the erosion of trust in the healthcare system particularly hurts as well. Yep. There was when you can trust your doctor to help you make a good decision, that's the best scenario. But when you lose that level of trust, then the whole process falls apart.
Sure. On this idea of parental rights and parents making the decision for their children, you were a big force in what got us to be, I believe, the 11th state to adopt universal school choice, which seems to be going, best I can tell as a participant with my 7 children, exceedingly well. I think, what was there, 30,000 people that applied for the Choice Act? And here, I'm gonna give you my surprised face in this thing where I actually praise our government, which I don't do very often. I don't have a reputation for that. My wife and I applied. We have 7 children. We applied for the Choose Act. I think that's what it's called, the Choose Act, not the Choice Act. Choose Act, to get school choice. 2 of our children are going to go to a classical Christian academy, an ACCS school that participates, and then we have 7 kids, and you only get 2 homeschool kids that get to participate, which is funny because no one that homeschools only has 2 kids, right? Or maybe not none, but small percentage, whatever. But I'm grateful for what we do have. And the process was actually like the technology and the systems, and like you just put in the information into this database, and then they come through it and they reach out to you and they're like, boom, you're approved. Yeah. And I was like, I didn't know the government could function this way. So it's been a good thing. What are your thoughts? You were in the fight before it got passed. So kind of tell us the journey to school choice for Alabama.
Well, I have been in the fight for several years, and Senator Marsh, when he was pro tem, he was a proponent of school choice, and he and I worked together for 2 years drafting a bill. He ended up the last year that he was there, taking a bunch of amendments, hoping to get enough people to support it by accepting their amendment, and it ended up such a watered down bill. At the end, I said, Dale, I'm not even sure I'm going to support this. The way it's amended and the way it's gutted. But then the Choose Act has certainly worked great. The governor's office has done a good job of rolling that out. The bill I had the year before, I still think was better.
Yeah.
And it had two major differences. One, it didn't have the cap on homeschoolers, and it should not have. And then two, instead of getting a tax credit for it, you got just like a debit card.
Yeah.
The state loaded the $7,000 onto a debit card, and you could use that for approved educational purposes.
Yeah.
And so it was very easy to track. You got a monthly statement of what you spent it on. And so that was two things that I thought were better in the bill we had the year before. The other thing and I tried to get this amended into the Choose Act and unsuccessfully, but I offered the amendment and said the governor's office didn't want to take any amendments. They wanted to take it just like it was. But the other thing was that if there was money left over when you were graduated from high school, you could save that money and use it to further your education, again, for continuing educational purposes. Trade school, university. We're looking at people getting ready for the workforce. And if you were homeschooling your children, we'll say, and you had gotten this money through the high school years and you didn't spend all of it, well, it stayed in your account until that child was 21 and they could use it for approved educational purposes. So if you had saved money while you were homeschooling, you could pay for 2 or 3 years of trade school or whatever, or college, out of that same account as long as it was for direct educational purposes. And I thought that was very, very important. And but again, they did not take any amendments, and so I didn't get that amendment on when the Choose Act passed. But that's something I think to look at in the future, that, what could be. And the reason I had for it, and in full transparency, I've served on the board of a Christian school. I'm not now, but I have several years ago. And I thought it was a perfect stopgap measure to prevent private schools from raising tuition.
Yeah.
That if the tuition was whatever, we'll say $7,000 a year, and now you're going to get $7,000 a year in the Choose Act, well, we're going to raise the tuition to 10 because you could already afford 7, and now it's only going to cost you 3, and so we're going to just bump our tuition up. And if the parents had an incentive of, if we don't spend all this money, we can use it for college or trade school or whatever until the child's 21, they would say, whoa, you're not going to raise our tuition that much. You were making it when tuition was $7,000. You're not going to raise it to 10. So it was a automatic parental control thing to keep schools from just automatically raising their tuition. Yeah. So plus you could save the money. Yeah. No, I think that's good. So that was the two main things: the saving the money and just the direct payment to you. And instead of it being a tax credit, I thought both of those would have been better. But I'm for the Choose Act. They've done a great job of rolling it out, and there was obviously a big need. Many more people applied than there was money for, so we've had to increase the cap. Yeah, and I think and we did, and I think that's incredible. And the thing that I like is, like, again, is it the perfect bill? No, but is it one I never expected to see this quickly? This quickly, but I think Del Marsh was working on it for like 12 years. Yeah, but it is passed. People are going to begin to participate it next year, like, and actually be going to school that is paid for. And we're going to get a new governor. Okay, you're going to get a new governor soon, and I think he's going to want to really, whether it would have been Will Ainsworth or whether it was Tommy Tuberville, but it looks like it won't be Will. It looks like it's probably very much going to be Tuberville based off of what we're seeing right now. But either one of those guys is going to be a lot more innovative as they approach education. They're not just going to look at this system that literally, the worse it does, the more money we give it. Think about that. Think about any other situation where, oh man, the schools did worse, we should give them more money.
And it's flipped around too. The more money we give them, the worse they do. So however you flip the incentive structure, either the more money they get, the worse they do, or the worse they do, the more money they get. However, if it's chicken and egg on that, the end of that is if nobody reads, they get all the money. And so they're literally being financially incentivized to suck. And so they suck, and that's not good. And so there needs to be some type of innovative approach to flipping this. I think school choice was the first. I think getting rid of tenure. But again, with Coach Tuberville, I think you're going to have someone who wants to hear really innovative ideas and do things that are revolutionary. And so hopefully he'll, not hopefully, I'm very confident that he's going to.
Yeah. I agree, and he's coming at those things from the same perspective that I had. I'm not, as I said at the beginning, I'm not a career politician, even though I'm now in my third term. I came from the private sector, from working to, make things happen. And it was so opposite of anything I had done, as a physician. If, another physician is involved in a patient's care, we have the same goal, to help the patient get well and arrive at a diagnosis and formulate a treatment plan. Well, in Montgomery, it's hard to get people to agree on what the diagnosis is. And then you have a plan like school choice, so this will help education. Well, I don't want that to work.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not against public education. I'm for it being better, but you're exactly right. The process of accountability I've said repeatedly, are we getting better? Are we ranking better than we were 10 years ago? Every year since I've been in the legislature, we've passed a record education budget. Are we better off than we were 10 years ago?
No.
And there's no data to say that we are. Well, we're making progress. But the answer you universally get is, we can't compare those. That's a different test. We can't compare those numbers from that year to this year. Well, the fact is, if you think math is getting better, try to get a teenager to count change.
Yeah.
The common sense things of math that we all learned, that we all took for granted, we've got a new way to add. We've got a new way to multiply. Well,
yeah,
some of that's not working.
Yeah. Also gender ideology. They're going to get that now instead of math. So,
yeah. Right.
Well, Dr. Stutts, thank you so much for coming in. This is really good. And we're going to do an overtime segment, guys, on basically what first 120 days of Trump, we'll have a conversation about that. Why is the energy that is so prevalent in D.C. with the Trump 2.0, what is it going to take for that energy to transfer to Alabama? And just kind of our thoughts on that. So we'll be doing that. Dr. Stutts, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that'll wrap it up for this week. Until next time, as always, put your trust in God and keep your powder dry.